Hello, our dear viewers. Now here in Kiev, we are in the studio of National Television Company of Ukraine, and we continue our special United Country. On the crisis on Crimea will be our main topic. And now we have very great guests in our studio. All are the representatives of National University of Kyiv-Mogila Academy. From left to right, Andriy Milishevich, Dean of Kyiv-Mogila Law School and PhD in Political Science. Mikhail Minakov is a Doctor of Philosophy and Political Science and also a representative of Kyiv-Mogila Academy. And Yevhen Fedchenko, Director of Kyiv-Mogila School of Journalism. The first question, actually, I would like to address to Mr. Yevhen Fedchenko. Mr. Fedchenko, you are head of one of the best master program in Ukraine of journalism, and I know that you are actually a good activist of a new startup that called Stop Fake. Stop Fake, what is it? What is that? And why did you decide to actually to make these things? What is that?
Yeah, actually, at our school we realized that there is not only the military warfare around, but very strong information warfare. And 1 week ago we gathered together with students and alums of our different programs, the graduate program and a digital future of journalism program for mid-career journalists, and brainstorm what we can do to offer to counterbalance this informational warfare, which is really a danger because it can get to very different audiences, and it spread only one point of view, and this is a Russian point of view. And among different ideas we discussed, we stopped at the idea of one of our students at journalism program who suggested to start a website where we would collect and monitor and verify and fact-check different news stories and check if they are not propaganda. And we started 1 week ago with just 2 stories, and it was very basic layout for the website based on WordPress platform with probably 5 people who started doing that. And by the end of the day, it appeared that some Ukrainian media picked up the story and spread the word, and in 2 hours after the launch we already had very strong DOS attack on the website, which continued for 24 hours, and we had more than 8 million applications during this time, so it's basically 100 applications per second from very different countries. So we decided to move the website somewhere else and to safeguard it against this attack. And gradually we picked up the stories, and then basically it appeared that this idea is very interesting to many people around. And what we did, we asked, so it became a crowdsourced project in many senses of the word. So we decided that we would not have any kind of permanent staff who would be doing this project, but it would be those who would volunteer to join, who just have time or any other resources to check the stories. And also we decided to ask our audience to send us tips on what stories they consider to be fake, and we now receive huge amount of feedback from very different countries, from Ukraine, from Russia. Today received an email from Finland with a story implanted by Russian media into Finnish media. I received
international project.
Yeah, it became immediately very international, and when I read through emails we receive, it really has very international outreach, and we have around 400,000 unique visitors already. So 2/3 of them are from Ukraine, and we are doing it both in Russian and English. So it basically covers Russian-speaking part of Ukraine, and 1/3 of visitors are from Russia, which is very interesting. And we also have some visitors from United States, from European countries. So basically English variant of this product is oriented towards international journalists crowd, because they also see a lot of stories on Ukraine who are very far from being true, and we try to debunk these stories, to fact check, and then to say just this is fake, it cannot be like that. So it's very interesting because this idea was just around and very easy, to pick up, and to develop it. And as I mentioned, nobody works, we don't have any permanent staff, so I cannot say that there is someone who is in charge of this project. So it's interesting from this point of view, and also we can monitor from where the visitors come. And I notice the increasing importance of social media, because most clicks we receive coming from Facebook. And now we have a page on Facebook with more than 5,000 subscribers, and it's just in 1 week. And now we have around 2,000 followers on Twitter. And Twitter was started even later, so it's just probably in 4 or 5 days we have number. And also many people comes from Vkontakte, where we work very effectively, and from Odnoklassniki, where we cover as well, because that's where our audience also is. So it's really quite an interesting phenomenon to see how it works.
Yeah, and why did you decide to do that? There are so many fakes from Russian media, from Russian propaganda machine, and why, as you said, that a lot of Ukrainian news and TV channels just repost all these things on the websites, or even someone put it in the air. So why does journalists in Ukraine, some journalists or journalists put this news, fake news, in the air? Why?
Yeah. So at some point for us it became obvious that it's kind of a campaign. It's not just, here and there you just see some kind of biased story or something like that. So it was a chain of very meticulously placed stories, mostly originating at Russian big media companies like Russia 24 or Russia Today or Voice of Russia Radio. And then they are picked up by internet and by social media and spread very virally, very quickly. And sometimes it's very easy to say that this is a fake story, because usually you cannot find the source from where information comes. Usually they quote some unnamed source, or they just quote each other, which makes it even interesting, because you cannot then figure out from where the story originated. And usually the weirder the story, the better, because then it would be picked up by social media very quickly and again virally spread between users, So we had the absolutely wild amount of stories about Ukrainian military surrender, starting the very first minute of this campaign, and we just debunked it, quoting the Ministry of Defense. And another story which was placed also very meticulously was about the Ukrainian language issue, that Latin alphabet would be introduced. It was so quickly picked up by social media, and it became so influential story in eastern part of Ukraine, because we went to different forums and discussions and comments, and we could look that it really resonated very well with people over there. So we decided to debunk it as quick as possible, just to remove it from agenda. And then some stories were sent to us by users, as I said. For example, the story about the same woman participated in different cities, in different pro-Russian demonstrations.
Political tourism.
Yeah, so it was political tourism, or as it was called during electoral campaign, carouseling around, from city to city. And or when we saw this shooting thing in Simferopol, which was basically the pretext for Russian Duma hearings, and basically their decision to move Russian military in here. So it was staged, and people in social media and even bloggers were the first who started that, but they had very limited opportunity to spread the word, because I mean one blogger cannot compete with the whole, you know, state-sponsored propaganda machine. So we picked up the story and spread it very quickly, and it became kind of a common sense already that yes, that story was totally faked, it was staged, and professional actor was, you know, involved in that, and this famous bus which was saying from Lviv to Maidan, you know, or something like that. So it was very different signature on it. And so that's stories which are very easy to debunk, but if nobody is doing that, it really spreads very quickly and became a common knowledge, which is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's kind of phenomena we decided that we need to battle it. And then we accidentally picked up the other audience. We didn't expect it was a lot of people from Russia who joined the discussion, and most of them are very eager to hear what we are telling them, not only what Russian media are telling. And they, you know, usually give us a big shout, because what they say, we are doing a great job, you know, counterbalancing the huge governmentally, you know, managed efforts. And so this is a very small project moving from, you know, it's a grassroots project with just very few activists around who can, you know, withstand a very powerful machine, which makes this great.
Yeah, great. So I wanted to join also Mr. Minakov and Mr. Milishevich. Mr. Minakov, just a question for you, like a philosopher. Could we say that Ukraine now, well, following our conversation, the battle, not only actually soldier battle, like a hidden war there in Crimea, but also the battle of some kind of post-Soviet discourse, Russian, and Western discourse, Western mentality that is, well, actually are being very popular among the elite, among the people here in Ukraine?
Well, actually, what we see today in Ukraine is the battlefield of democracy and authoritarianism. And the message from Kremlin was clear for about several years, that there's growing authoritarian rule, and not only in Russia. The project of conservative Europe is going westwards. It covers Ukraine and Moldova, but it goes also to Central Europe. And my colleagues in Germany, where we discussed this issue just several days ago, are ready to see more and more pro-Putin deputies in European Parliament. So this plan goes far beyond Ukraine, but we are the aim number one. And here it is exactly the battlefield where democracy and authoritarianism come together. Well, if we look back, we just had, few weeks ago, we just took over the authoritarian rule of Kremlin type. We just ruined the vertical of power, the model that was created by Lukashenko and that was wonderfully implemented by Putin. We also we were dealing with this feudal system of center versus regions cooperation. Putin created this system in Russia, and then Yanukovych was mimicking it in Ukraine. As soon as he gone, suddenly the whole system collapsed. Same will happen in Russia when there will be Putin gone, and I hope it's going to be quite soon. I really think that what Putin is doing now is actually putting him on a verge of disaster for him and for Russia. And I think then, as soon as Putin's gone, when this adventure, this aventure in Crimea is done, he will not have enough legitimacy to rule there. And when he's done, Russia will feel really sorry about what was done in those years, from within and to the neighbors.
Mr. Milishevich, I would like to ask you, Is the situation in Crimea now is a threat to judicial system, actually, to the system of check and balances that have been formalized in Helsinki Act and actually in even after the war, because the territorial integrity of every state in Europe, in every country here is being adopted, and actually the Soviet Union, the country that signed all these acts, and Putin threatens now all the security all over the world. So what are the consequences of all these things?
Yeah, this is a very good question. And the inviolability of borders in post-war Europe, this is a crucially important thing, because Europe suffered a lot because of all these disputes between different countries fighting for particular territory. And after the end of the Second World War, there was not only tacit agreement, but also there were some agreements signed by all independent nations of Europe that borders in post-war Europe are untouchable. Untouchable. This is a taboo even to talk about that. And this is so dangerous. And what we witness now, this is, as I'm saying, extremely dangerous thing. It sets a pattern, a precedent for the European nations. If Russia decides to violate borders of independent nation, it means because they can, it means that other nations, European nations, will be able to follow the Russian example and to do the same thing. So this is, again, this is extremely dangerous precedent. I would like to say several words about this referendum that was scheduled and which is supposed to take place in several days. From the point of view of Ukrainian law, Ukrainian domestic law, in addition to international law, of course, it's a completely illegal act. And for many different reasons. There are some legal issues involved, of course, and there are some just common sense issues. The first of all, the Ukrainian constitution has something which is called eternity clause. And this eternity clause can be seen in other constitutions in European countries and other nations. So what does it mean? It means that territorial integrity of Ukraine is not for the discussion. Human rights, the regime of human rights that exists in Ukraine is not for this discussion. These things cannot be changed under any circumstances. This is a taboo. So the fact that a part of the unitary state, and I am talking about Ukraine as a unitary state, we do have Autonomous Republic of Crimea, but it does not change the whole regime. It's a unitary state. So one part of the nation decides to withdraw from the territory of the country. So it is, again, impossible to do according to the Ukrainian institution. Of course, we know the argument that the authorities in Crimea and authorities in Sevastopol exceeded their rights. Yes, they are exceeded their rights. There is not a single legal piece in Ukraine that provides them with rights to change territorial integrity of Ukraine. Another argument, there is no law on local referendum. There is no law on local referendum. This is definitely true. So they do not have legal ground, again, to conduct this referendum. But these are legal issues. On the other hand, there are just common sense issues. And of course, they also involve some human rights issue. It just does not make any sense to conduct agreement when a territory is full of people with guns, when channels of Ukrainian channels are cut up, when there is no free discussion of the issues, and when the length of this preparation for the referendum is just meager. It's just, a week or something? It's just impossible to conduct a full-scale debate, meaningful debate, to hear all other, different points of view, to make sure that citizens understand what they vote for, and so on. Of course, I can probably, the Russian Federation and Crimean authorities argue that they have, and every nation has self-determination rights. Yes, this is correct. But at the same time, if they want to pursue, again, it would be illegal from the Ukrainian law point of view. But let's say that they base some of their considerations on the international some provisions, international law provisions, and they want to conduct a referendum. But they should follow example, for example, in Canada or in other countries where this referendum, this kind of referenda were held, which means that there is a clear period for discussion. Again, all points of view are able to be expressed. All interested parties are able to speak up and to convince other interested parties, in their argument. So from this perspective, again, common sense perspective, this agreement this referendum just does not make any sense.
Okay, so and I just wanted to to look a bit at future. Okay, if 16th on March will be a referendum, and someone from the representatives and head of now Crimean regime, local one, will say that actually it is the point is that there are two only questions, and it is very interesting. The two questions. One question is just would you like to be with Russia? The second one is would you like to get back to the Constitution of 1992? And there is no third question actually, and so actually the questions in this referendum are manipulative, we can say. What will have this referendum results if there will be an answer that most of Crimeans are for joining with Russia, for example, for informational policy of Ukraine, for the actually political situation between and the relationships between Russia and Ukraine and between East and West broadly. What will it mean for international community and for Ukraine in particular?
Well, first of all, it's said that the outcomes of the referendum are known. And we heard several different politicians in the Crimean autonomy, in the Russian Federation proper, that the results would be like 74% in favor of. And if you look at the composition of the population in Crimea, the 74-75%, this is probably the Russian-speaking population of the Russians. Ethnic Russians. So it excludes ethnic Ukrainians and it excludes Crimean Tatars. Now that the Crimean Tatars said that we are not going to participate in the referendum, and many Ukrainians, I believe, will support this point of view because why bother if the outcomes are known, then there is a danger for the authorities in Crimea that they might reach 100%. And they are afraid and scared of that. This is why probably Mr. Dzhemilov was hastily invited, to Moscow that for some kind of agreements. And I'm sure that one of the points that he will be pushed by Mr. Putin to participate in this referendum, so to cast at least some percentage of votes against this, because again, 100% votes in favor of the referendum. I mean, in favor of the question of merging.
Well, in Soviet Union, there were some people who were voting against, like 1%.
Yes, and actually, in the Russian Federation, there were several constituencies that voted more than 100%. In fact, I think that I don't know if it's the official power in Crimea or it was some kind of NGO, but they just several days ago launched a website. And people could vote in favor or against the referendum, and they already got 102%. So you see,
very interesting, Joe. Mr. Minako, I just wanted to ask you. There are a lot of ethnicities in Crimea. Actually, it is multi-ethnicity region. Crimean Tatars, Russians, Ukrainians. Also, there are Karaims and other ethnicities. How Ukraine and Ukrainian authorities could manage to, with all this peace between ethnicities, not to, because today I had a chance to also to speak with Dzhemilov, the leader of Majlis, and he said that there is a big offer offer from Russia, from this local government in Crimea, well, to actually to persuade, to make Crimean Tatars in favor of this referendum. I mean that they, for example, Putin might say to them that we will give you all the land, we can give you a lot of money, we can, for example, make you a quota of 15% in Crimean local parliament, and so on and so on. So why Ukrainian government for 23 years there was no big steps towards the Crimean Tatars' interests?
Well, yes, for all the times of independence, Ukrainian government and Ukrainian elites were quite lazy in terms of nation building. But at the same time, I must admit that Ukrainians, the majority, were also not in the favorable situation. Well, Ukraine turned out to be this facade democracy with elites tending to hijack society, hijack our state and government. And majority of population was outside of all those distribution networks, safety networks, and so on. And of course, minorities or those groups that we can say of cultural identity, of lingual identity, felt not really too much loyal to the government. But once again, the spirit of republic that Maidan was bringing twice into picture was showing that Russians and Ukrainians, Russian speakers and Ukrainian speakers were together there, working for the common good. The issue is to find that common good. The issue is to create a government that is transparent, that is responsible, and also create the system of local self-governance. For a long time, we were over-centralized country. For hijacked regimes, it's normal, it's usual. Yes, we have to go on and create our own government. We have to stop being etatists. And this Ukrainian tradition of etatism must be stopped after Euromaidan. We paid already a huge price in human lives. And the lessons must be learned. Presidential Institute showed us that it's a danger to each and every citizen in Ukraine. Weak parliamentarian culture, it's a danger. Absence of local self-administration is a danger. Tax administration, taxation system is a danger. Absence of economic freedoms is a danger. So basically we have to reconstruct everything. And this is the critical moment. And this critical moment of creating republic, creating common good for the whole of nation is actually, well, put in danger right away by this intervention in Crimea. Again, Crimea must bring us another lesson, that national issue, national minorities, lingual minorities, or big groups like Russian speakers should be respected, and that our legislation should take into account those problems. We should not close eyes on those. But again, common good is major idea. It's something that brings all the citizens together. It involves citizens in spite of their identities.
Well, what about common goods? Actually, I had a chance to be in Crimea just a couple weeks ago in Sevastopol and talking with common people that are gathered on Nahimo Square there. It's a central square of Sevastopol. Right. And actually, it was before the clashes between Crimean Tatars and Russians, just in the morning of the day between clashes between Crimean Tatars and Russians near the Simferopol Crimean parliament. And the problem is that I had an impression that people who were talking to me, they were actually in favor of those values that Maidan brought to the people. Because they were against corruption, they were for prosperity, they were for transparency. Actually, it is a common good. Actually, a common good. But the problem is that when the people saying, maybe because of informational propaganda, that we are for Russia, and what is Russia for you? Okay, this new government, they, for example, let's hope that it will fight against corruption. There will be a transparent government. It will be transparent government, no corruption in Crimea. Are you in favor of that? Yes, we are in favor of that. Actually, we are for that. We are for all these things, but we are for Russia. So very interesting that people actually have these common values, common willingness to have a common like interest. Why? What Ukraine and Ukrainian state, government, common people, society should suggest Crimean people who are now maybe very I don't know. They don't actually very often know. Don't know what they want. What should it be like? Guarantees of self-rule, guarantees of that there will be a lot of investments in Crimea to make Crimean tourist season very popular, or something else, or maybe some kind of I don't know new philosophy, not because a lot of people are actually afraid of right nationalism, are actually afraid of this ethnicity emphasis in Ukrainian politics. Maybe we should suggest them like something else, not only that. What else? How do you think?
Yeah. Probably I would agree with what you mentioned in your commentary and what Mikhailo said, that there are different dangers around, and one of the danger we have to deal with is very weak media system here, because it appears that we cannot offer media content which would fit into the expectations of different audiences. I can give you just some figures of attitudes of people. Kiev International Institute of Sociology probably a couple of weeks ago did a poll asking people in different regions if they would be willing to have united country with Russia, and the highest figure was in Crimea, only 40%. And then we move from region to region and it decreases, and in Kharkiv it's only 15%. So it's really, it gives the feeling of the real feelings of people over there. And probably it was, blown out of proportion by media, by Russian media first of all, that this is dominantly the regions which are dominantly, trying to get into Russian sphere formally. Not from language point of view or cultural point of view, but formally from governmental point of view, to be a part of the Russian state. So these figures usually are, really blown out of proportion, and I think these poll figures are really reflective in how things are really seen in these regions, and so we need to deal with that. So if 15% of people in Kharkiv want to have more Russian language, more Russian media, something like that, they can have it, and it's not a problem at all, and it would not depend on what government is in Kiev, so they can consume Russian media, but it should be fair consumption. If Russian media are, telling 24 hours a day to their audience in Ukraine that your government is, it's fascist, revanchist government, and they are, going to kill all of you just because you speak in Russian. So I don't see a kind of fair use of this media resource here.
Some Russian media, like Rain, for example, TVs that have been cut, that saying...
Yeah, so we need to understand that there are different people who prefer to have more Russian in their life, and there are different Russian media who can deal in different way with that needs. And probably Ukrainian media need to cater more to that, and not only giving just entertainment in Russian, because Inter TV channel is offering a lot of programming in Russian language, but what kind of programming is that? It's not that much, high quality, and very often that cannot compete with what Russian channels are offering. So Eastern and Southern Ukraine basically became informationally monopolized by Russian media, and we need to understand that it is Russian state-owned media, with one ideology, overwhelming ideology, which is not offering a lot of alternatives, how it should be understood. So it's really very, direct messages, how people should understand what happened in their own country, and it's a lot of news on Ukraine, and it's a lot of talk shows where a lot of entire Ukrainian politics is usually discussed, and now we have the whole shows devoted entirely to Ukraine, and it really works for most audience in eastern and southern Ukraine, because they get the information about what happens in Kiev not from Kiev or from Ukrainian media, but they're getting it from Russian media, and it gives them very different perspective on what really happens here. And many people trust to what they hear and what they watch, and especially if this is really manipulated, and it is usually manipulated, so it gives a feeling of disastrous chaos happening here, and then of course people would be happy if some other alternative would be offered to them. And if they are offered kind of referendum, if they can join Russia in this situation, of course many of them would choose that. But I just want to add that here we hear a lot of mooing about that Russian channels should be just cut off, and that would make people better informed. I don't think that this is a kind of healthy alternative, because that would be just another reason to show that Ukraine is just oppressing people based on their language or any other issues. So probably some more public diplomacy tools should be used here to give it as an alternative, not just we cut Russian channels off and give nothing instead.
Well, yeah, and also I just wanted to join Mr. Andrei, and one small question, your reaction. Do you think that it is a blackmail from Putin, because they wanted to cut Crimea from Ukraine, blocking it with own soldiers? There will be an election on 25th of May here in Ukraine, and what will it be elections here when 2 million people that are living in Crimea, for example, won't vote? And could we say that after this election, if in Crimea there won't be, people who are coming and voting for one or other candidate, that this election are actually illegitimate, because it is not a representatives, it is not a votes from everyone. Maybe it is also a reason why Putin wants to interfere such kind in Ukrainian politics. Maybe he does not want election here. Let
me go back to your previous question. I'd like to add something that about the issue about corruption. The basic needs and the basic values of all nations across the world are basically the same. We all want to live in a safe environment. We all want to live happily. We all want to have prosperous life, so our kids grow up in safety, peace, and so on. We all want the government listen to the ordinary people and to be responsive to our needs. This is normal. What we have now, what we had, let's say, before this Euro revolution, that Ukraine was first a semi-authoritarian state, then it was a super-presidential authoritarian state, a model which was no different from the Russian model, in fact. Lack of transparency, lack of openness, almost total corruption, an authoritarian leader that, concentrates power in his hands and makes all decisions. So now Ukraine has a choice. Now we overthrow their government. I'm very proud of that, actually, that we were able to resist deadly force used against the Ukrainians, and we were able to overthrow that government. Now history gives us another choice. Hopefully we will not waste it. I don't want it. I will definitely hate, seeing that we waste this chance. So let's suppose that Ukraine moves towards normal civilized direction. And in 5, 10, 15 years, whatever, hopefully more democratic values spread up in Ukraine, and Ukraine moves closer to Europe, to European values, democratic values, human rights values, human dignity values, and so on. As for Crimea, if they stay with Russia, the model is well known. Crimea will join the Russian Federation, and there will not be any option. I wish all the best. I sincerely will wish all the best to people in Crimea. If they believe that they will be more happy, more prosperous, and more safe, in the Russian Federation. So I think that it might happen. But from what I see, based on our experience, what we can absorb, the political regime that exists in our neighbors in the Russian Federation, unfortunately, the Russian values today, at least governmental values, the values that the government tries to instill in the country, are very different from the European values. And I do not think, if Crimea stays with Russia, I do not think there will be significant change. There will be still plenty of corruption, there will be lack of transparency, lack of openness, there will be definitely one person who makes all decisions from the Crimeans. They, the Crimeans are very different from the Russians who live in Russia, because they lived in a country that at some period of time was a democratic nation. And whether they want it or not, they are exposed to these values. And if, let's say, the authoritarian regime would instill more authoritarian rule in that part of the world, it's a natural thing for people to resist. So I would not be, I want just to warn people in Crimea that take off your rosy glasses and face reality, and think not just a step ahead, think about 5, 6, 10 steps ahead, several years ahead. And quite possible, at least I would not discard this possibility, that in 5, 10 years the regime would be so hated, I mean in Crimea, again, if Crimea stays with Russia, that there will be popular upheavals against the Russian regime, against the Russian authoritarian rule.
And what about legitimacy of the elections if Crimeans won't vote?
About our elections, Ukraine will survive. There are plenty of historical examples when one area does not participate in national elections. Of course, it's bad. Nobody is saying that it's good. But Russia survived when Chechnya did not participate in the elections. And nobody questioned the legitimacy of Mr. Putin. He is a legitimately democratic. Let me withdraw democratically, but probably the first case election was democratic elections. Later on it was questionable. But the thing that nobody challenges legitimacy of President Putin. So Ukraine definitely is going to survive. Again, let me emphasize the fact that a section of the population, a sizable section, territorial population, some territory of a nation doesn't participate in elections. This is bad. We have to state that. But again, it would not minimize the legitimacy of the Ukrainian institutions. I hope at some point when normalcy returns to Crimea, they definitely will have a chance to participate in elections. Not in presidential elections, if they select not to participate, but in the parliamentary elections, definitely they are going to participate, because I'm sure that some segment, some number of seats proportion, well, dependent on the electoral system, so some proportion of seats will be held for the Crimea. There is another issue, of course. Let's say there is an issue of people who want Ukraine to stay in boundaries that exist today, people who want Crimea to be part of Ukraine, and they are not able to participate in elections. This is a significant human rights violation. Significant. This is international standards, international norms, international law guarantees people to participate in elections, guarantees their right for political participation. And if the Crimean Authority withdraw this right from a pretty sizable segment of population who wants Ukraine and Crimea stay together, then it's a problem. How to deal with this problem is difficult to say. Of course, the Crimean Authority might allow some, in major cities, have some voting stations and people can participate. It will be a civilized decision. But I think that they are afraid because, in a way, it would be a real referendum. So this referendum might be rigged, I mean the one that will take place in several days, but the number of people who will hopefully participate in presidential elections, it would be a real referendum. And if a significant section, if a significant proportion of the population does participate in elections, then it would be a sign how many people want Ukraine and, want Crimea to be part of Ukraine. I assume that some people might travel outside of Crimea, I mean Crimeans who want to participate in elections, might travel outside of Crimea to Kherson region, to Zaporizhia region, Odessa perhaps, and cast their vote there. It would be also a choice, a possibility.
Okay, and I just wanted to point some other topic. What about, it's a question to you, Mr. Minikov, about actually consciousness of Russian empirical consciousness and Ukrainian. Could we say that actually the fears of Putin and fears of, it is not like a personal one, it is more like empirical elite of Russia, because they wanted to keep all the big countries, such big countries, biggest country and territory in the world, together. And after the successful case of Ukraine, and for example, after Maidan, after European integration, after, for example, fighting against corruption, transparency and prosperity, then Russians there will understand that the way of just to be, to use energy resources, to sell them, corruption state, actually failed state, prosperity only because of energy resources, is not a good way. Maybe these elites just to interfere Crimea and put the soldiers there to keep Russia together, to keep and just to make here chaos, to make all own nation understand that Ukraine is in chaos now, and it's not a case of prosperity.
Well, I'm quite critical to the very notion of Russian consciousness or Ukrainian consciousness. There are traditions governing of governments or statehoods, and in Russia there's two conflicting traditions, liberal and imperial. Well, liberals lost their case in 1990s, and now the imperial rule is back there. There was a different possibilities for this imperial rule to be articulated in a Russian nationalist way or in Soviet imperial. Well, what we see today, it's more Soviet imperial that actually creates this overboarding or transborder ideology for those who actually profess it and confess it. But well, let's see at ourselves, at Ukraine. If we are a good case of reforms, showing that this revolution, European Maidan, has actually made the change, that people started living better off, that we went this Polish way, Polish path, when small business, medium level business are booming, and when government is quite responsible, and when parliament is actually the place for debates, and when the civil society is bringing up and making an impact on government, then it's a different story. Also, Ukraine should start thinking in a trans-border way as well. We are too much isolated. Let's create Russian-speaking channels that would actually talk to Russians in Russia. Why not to invite Dost to start bringing their news from here? That's very important way to change the way we think here, to start being less isolated. Let's look 10 years ago, Orange Revolution. It created an impetus for our development, and we didn't move on. Unlike Georgia. Georgia still represents this partial success, at least in economic, in some judicial reform. And would this country succeed in democracy as well? I think Russian imperial rule would also be defeated, and liberals in Russia would have more to say. So that's my answer. Ukrainians, now we are responsible for success, for ourselves and for the rest of the region.
Yeah. Okay, so finalizing our conversation, I just wanted to ask you, just in couple words, maybe 30 seconds, 1 minute, what is the main, what could you suggest to resolve, to make the situation calmer in Crimea, and what can you advise for Crimean people? What should they hear? Whom to, where to go, and what should also just maybe 10 or 20 seconds? What should international community do in this case? Maybe starting with you.
I get that we need to start with communicating. We need to, and I guess we need 3 channels to do that. We need to communicate some main ideas inside Ukraine, to understand that we are on the same page in the way how we look, where we're moving from now. Then we need to communicate to those people who are in Crimea or any other region who doesn't, where we do not feel that we are really, safe on the ground in terms of where people belong in, we need to talk to them as well, and we need to talk to each other, and then we need to communicate to the world who we are, what we are going to do next. And even in times of this Crimea crisis, we need to communicate to the world a lot to make sure that we are not left alone, and to explain everything we are doing, and to make sure that people understand who we are, what our plans are, and what our next steps would be. So these 3 major communications might solve the problem.
Okay, Mr. Minkov.
Well, 2 main recipes for internal policy and external policy, international policy. For internal, we must respect the cultural pluralism that we have, and to make politics response to it, not to see it as a burden. So that also makes us to avoid radicals in government. Also, there's the giving more authority, giving more power to local communities. I would avoid those oblasts. I don't really understand what is the function there, but rayons, local councils, must be plenipotential and very strong. That would ruin I'm sure that it will ruin this duplication in 2 Ukraines, the East and in the West. And in international politics, well, we, first of all, must be very patient. We must be very intelligent and wise. We should understand that problem with Crimea, it's next 20 years probably. And we have to merge with European and Euro-Atlantic structures. We must become part of international community. When we are there, Crimean case wouldn't be possible and will not be.
Thank you very much.
It's in vital interest of the population of Crimea to make a conscious choice. People have to understand what they are going to vote for. Because this political euphoria to join Russia will disappear very soon. And then bitter reality will come up. And I think that people will serve them well if they learn all other options and other different scenarios which might come after the Crimean autonomy might join the Russian Federation. And it would be a grave mistake for Crimean population to be impoverished Abkhazia.
Thank you very much. Here now in Kiev, in our studio, we were searching for a new advices for solving the Crimean crisis, and I hope that our dear guest, it's Evgeny Khyatchenko, Rector of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy School of Journalism, Mikhailo Minnikov, Doctor in Philosophy and Political Science, and Andrei Milishevich, Dean of Kyiv-Mohyla Law School, PhD in Political Science, actually found some good piece of advices, and I hope that our viewers in Ukraine, in Russia, and all over the world will understand Crimean crisis not only from the point of view of Russian state media, but also from actually Ukrainian point of view. It was Mikhailo Smutok and the Special United Country, and see you just in a couple minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.